India does not hide its mysteries. It lives with them. In its mountains, in its deserts, in its ancient temples, places where logic breaks, nature misbehaves, and history simply refuses to explain itself. These aren't legends or rumors. They're real places, real mysteries. And no one, not science, not history, has ever fully explained them. Tonight, we uncover 10 Indian mysteries that will never be solved. Strange, sacred, and hauntingly real. Each one whispering that not everything in this world is meant to be understood. Before we begin, like this video, subscribe for more mysteries every week, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Deep in the mist-covered hills of Assam lies a tiny village that seems quiet, ordinary, almost sleepy at first glance. Jatinga, a place with only a few thousand residents, bamboo houses, forested slopes, and long stretches of silence. But every year, when the monsoon begins to fade and the winds shift, the valley wakes up to an event so strange that even today, scientists describe it as one of India's most disturbing natural mysteries. Because for just a few nights each year, hundreds of birds drop out of the sky, just disoriented, dazed, hypnotized, flying straight toward the village lights as if pulled by an invisible force. No migration pattern in the world explains it. No known instinctive behavior matches it. And nothing about Jatinga's geography should cause birds to behave this way. Yet the event has been recorded for more than a century. It begins sometime around September, when the fog is thick enough to blur the tree line. Villagers say the air becomes heavy, the sky loses its color, and the entire valley feels like it's holding its breath. For generations, locals believed evil spirits were driving the birds to their deaths. They built stories around it, curses, demons, omens, because what else could explain birds voluntarily crashing toward humans? Different species too. Not one kind, not one migration group, not one region. These aren't weak birds or dying birds or birds caught in storms. They come from the surrounding forests, completely healthy, and something makes them abandon their natural instincts. Researchers from the 1970s onwards tried to decode the phenomenon. They camped in the village with notebooks, lamps, sound equipment, and cages to observe behavior. What they found only deepened the mystery. On those specific foggy nights, around 7 to 10 p.m., the birds suddenly lose their sense of direction, not partially but fully, as if their internal navigation system short-circuits. They fly toward any source of light, torches, lanterns, street lamps, even when they should be avoiding humans. And here's the strangest part. This doesn't happen anywhere else in the region, not even in neighboring villages, just a few kilometers away. Only Jatinga. Only those few nights. Only during that exact season. And only when fog sits at a certain height above the valley. Scientists proposed theories. Air pressure drops, heavy mist confusion, magnetic anomalies, changes in wind direction, but none of them fully explained the behavior. Magnetic disturbances, for instance, should affect compasses and equipment, but they don't. Light attraction shouldn't overpower survival instincts, but here it does. And if the birds were simply confused, they wouldn't fly in straight lines toward humans holding torches. They should scatter, but they don't. Some believe the valley generates a low-frequency sound during the season, something below human hearing, disturbing the birds' equilibrium. Others believe the geography creates a natural corridor of dense fog that disorients them. Some researchers argue that the birds enter a trance-like state triggered by atmospheric pressure. But every theory collapses under scrutiny. Too many exceptions. Too many contradictions. Local tribes still speak of the dark wind, a shift in the valley's energy that begins without warning. They say the birds are not dying, but being called. The government eventually banned the old tradition of capturing the birds, and now the village treats the event as a protected phenomenon. But even today, whenever the fog settles and September rolls in, the villagers prepare. They dim lights, block paths, and guide researchers who return year after year, trying to solve the case. Yet after decades of study, Jatinga remains an enigma, an intersection of nature, geography, and something deeper that science still hasn't named. A place where instinct fails, where logic bends, and where the sky itself behaves like it has secrets. And amazingly, this is only the beginning. Because another Indian mystery breaks the rules of physics itself, a stone pillar that should fall, but won't. If the birds of Jatinga challenge the laws of instinct, then the temple of Lepakshi challenges the laws of physics itself. In the small town of Lepakshi, Andhra Pradesh, stands a 16th century marvel, the Veerabhadra Temple, carved with the precision and confidence of artisans who believed the divine lived in stone. It is a place of murals, carved pillars, and shadowed hallways. Except one pillar behaves unlike anything a temple should have. One pillar that doesn't touch the ground. Step into the temple, and you'll find 70 stone pillars rising like a silent forest. Some are carved with dancers, some with warriors, some with sacred stories etched into every inch. But in the middle of this ancient geometry stands a single granite column that defies gravity, literally suspended a few millimeters above the stone floor. Locals call it simply the hanging pillar, because no one has found a better word. You can slide a cloth beneath it. You can slide a newspaper. In some cases, you can slide your fingers. A structure weighing several tons floats above the ground like an afterthought. In a world of mysteries, this one is deeply physical. You don't have to imagine it. You can touch it, test it, photograph it, and that's what makes it so unsettling. For a medieval temple crafted with hammers, chisels, and human labor, precision at this level should be impossible. Even with modern technology, architects would think twice before attempting a load-bearing illusion with granite blocks that weigh more than cars. Yet 6 centuries ago, someone balanced this pillar so perfectly that it still stands without touching the earth. To understand why it's such an anomaly, you have to imagine how temples were constructed in the Vijayanagara period. Every structure was built on interlocking stones. No modern cement, no steel supports, no industrial measurements. Builders relied solely on geometry, an experience passed down through generations. Pillars were carved out of massive blocks of granite, then fixed in place with joints that kept everything stable. Remove a pillar, and the structure collapses. And yet here is a pillar that was carved, positioned, adjusted, and somehow placed so precisely that it hovers without bearing weight, supported only by the surrounding stones that lock against each other like pieces of a cosmic puzzle. British engineers in the colonial era were among the first to publicly react. When they inspected the temple in the 1930s, they believed the pillar was a mistake, a sign of structural weakness, and attempted to fix it. They tried to straighten the pillar, pushing it to make it touch the ground. Their tools failed. The pillar didn't move down. In fact, their effort destabilized part of the roof, forcing them to abandon the attempt altogether. The unintended warning was clear. Whatever technique built this pillar was far beyond the logic of outsiders trying to correct it. The temple seemed to quietly resist interference. Local legends, of course, offer their own explanations. Some say the pillar hangs because the builders wanted to prove their skill to the gods, a final flourish, showing they had mastered the craft of stone so fully that even gravity could be persuaded. Others say the temple was never completed, and this pillar was part of a design that involved floating elements representing divine presence. Another belief claims the pillar was struck during an invasion and shifted from its original place, but did not collapse because the internal structure was too strong. But the simplest version, the one priests still whisper, is that the pillar is upheld by faith itself. A divine gesture placed there to remind visitors that gods do not always announce themselves in visions or miracles. Sometimes they rest quietly in engineering that steps beyond human explanation. Architects who study the structure today offer theories. Some believe the pillar was intentionally made to appear as if it hangs, with the load redistributed across neighboring columns. Others think subtle erosion over centuries created the gap. But the counter-argument remains. Weathering erodes from the top down, not bottom up. And even eroded stones don't form clean, deliberate gaps that allow a cloth to pass through. If the pillar were truly loose or useless, the temple would have shown signs of stress long ago. Cracked beams, sagging ceilings, displaced stones. Instead, the temple stands as firm as the day it was carved. The hanging pillar remains stable, unmoving, unreal. Visitors who come to Lepakshi often perform a small ritual. They fold a scarf or handkerchief and slide it underneath the pillar. If the fabric passes through smoothly, they believe good fortune follows. The act is both playful and reverent, a mix of disbelief and devotion. Because in an ordinary world governed by predictable rules, here is something that refuses to follow them. Even skeptics find themselves leaning in closer, trying to see whether there's a hidden support, a trick of perspective, or a structural oversight. But the temple offers no clues. No blueprints, no inscriptions. Only this one silent defiance, a stone refusing to rest on earth. Was it intentional? An accident that became a legend? A symbol encoded by ancient architects? Or a fragment of knowledge from a civilization more advanced than we assume? We may never know. The builders left nothing behind. No instructions, no reasons, no explanation. They left only the result. A granite column that refuses to touch the ground. And while it stands steady, the question around it moves restlessly through generations. How did they do it? But this is just one piece of India's architectural puzzle. Move a little east, and the landscape reveals something even stranger. A village where nature bends in a different way, not through stone or engineering, but through people themselves. A place where, inexplicably, twins are born at a rate seen nowhere else on Earth. Another mystery that refuses to offer answers is waiting. The baffling twin phenomenon of Kodinhi. Some places earn their mystery through legend, others through strange events. But Kodinhi, a quiet village in Kerala, holds its mystery in something far more ordinary: Earth. Because here, in a remote corner of Malappuram district, the laws of biology seem to bend. Kodinhi is known as the Village of Twins, a place where nearly every street, every cluster of homes, every generation carries pairs, identical, fraternal, and sometimes so alike that even their own parents pause to tell them apart. Today, in a population of around 2,000 families, more than 400 twins have been recorded, and no one can explain why. The phenomenon isn't subtle. Visitors say the first thing they notice is repetition, the same faces, the same walks, the same voices echoing twice. Schools in Kodinhi design special attendance systems because ordinary roll calls become chaos. Teachers joke that parents should color code their children. But beneath the humor lies a scientific puzzle that India's best researchers still haven't solved. The story of Kodinhi's twins doesn't begin with medicine, but with something the locals had been observing for decades. Mothers noticed it first. Families with no history of twins suddenly had them. Couples who moved into the village from other states, even other countries, also started giving birth to twins. The rate didn't change with genetics, culture, or ethnicity. Kodinhi seemed to override everything. Typically, the global twin birth rate ranges from 9 to 12 per 1,000 births. In Kodinhi, the rate is 6 to 7 times higher, closer to 45 per 1,000 births, sometimes even higher depending on the year. Researchers from India, Germany, and the Middle East have visited, expecting to find a genetic marker or a dietary pattern, something that could explain the numbers. So far, nothing fits. The standard explanations simply collapse. Some regions with high twin rates are linked to diets rich in certain herbs or yams believed to increase fertility. Kodinhi does not consume those foods. Some high twin communities share specific genetic mutations. Kodinhi does not. Environmental factors? Water? Soil? Climate? Nothing is unusual enough to justify the surge. Scientists looked at the village's drinking water because its mineral content was slightly different from neighboring regions. But even that theory fell apart. Women who moved to Kodinhi and consumed the same water gave birth to twins at the same elevated rate, but their relatives living outside the village did not. Whatever triggers the phenomenon seems tied to the land itself, not the lineage. Life in Kodinhi runs on its own set of rules. Walk through the market, and you'll see pairs of shopkeepers adjusting the same set of goods. You might see two girls walking to school, holding identical bags, identical braids bouncing in sync. Even weddings can be confusing. Guests sometimes greet the wrong groom. But the mystery takes an even stranger turn. The number of twins keeps rising. Local doctors say that 20 or 30 years ago, they would see 2 or 3 sets of twins each year. Now, it's far more frequent. The rate is not slowing down. If anything, it is growing stronger with every generation, a trend opposite to global patterns, where twin births usually remain stable or decline. One doctor described it in a way that stuck with researchers. It's like the village is encouraging twins, as if something here wants to replicate life twice. Despite Kodinhi attracting international attention, the village itself remains peaceful, untouched by tourism or commercialization. Most locals lead simple lives, farming, small businesses, teaching. They welcome scientists but don't dwell on theories. To them, twins are normal, expected, familiar. One mother said, in other places, they say twins are special. Here, the special ones are the single children. But beneath the normalcy lies a deeper question. Could this be a biological anomaly caused by ancient evolutionary patterns? Or is it a rare genetic drift that scientists simply haven't decoded? A few researchers have suggested that Kodinhi might be the result of a founder effect, when a small, isolated population shares a rare gene that grows exponentially over generations. But this doesn't explain why outsiders also start having twins after settling in the village. Some propose that environmental estrogens or natural hormones in the area might stimulate hyperovulation in women. But soil and water tests didn't support this. Others wondered if the answer lies deeper, in epigenetics, where the environment subtly alters gene expressions, not through mutation, but through chemical switches. If Kodinhi's environment is activating a gene related to fertility or ovulation, it might explain the phenomenon. But epigenetic changes of this scale have never been documented so intensely in any other part of the world. The mystery remains the same. Why here? And why so many? Kodinhi is not the only place with unusually high twin births. Nigeria's Igbo-Ora town, known as the twin capital of the world, also produces twins at astonishing rates. A village in Vietnam shows a similar trend. But Kodinhi stands apart because its twin rate stands out in an otherwise ordinary demographic. No unusual diets, no shared ancestry, no known biological triggers. It is, in many ways, a scientific outlier, a phenomenon that refuses to fit into any established framework. One of the strangest parts of this story is how predictable the unpredictability has become. Doctors in Kodinhi say they sometimes can guess when a woman is carrying twins even before the ultrasound. It's not medical intuition, just probability. Families with twins often have more twins in later generations. But families without any history also have them with equal likelihood. This breaks known hereditary patterns. Some believe this could be a long-term effect of natural selection. Perhaps something about the village's past made it advantageous for twins to survive, and the trait persisted. But there is no evidence of such events. Even more baffling is that the phenomenon does not appear to be slowing down. Data suggests Kodinhi might one day become the highest twin-producing region per capita on Earth. As you walk out of the village, leaving behind pairs of identical faces, identical voices, identical footsteps echoing in tandem, you're left with a simple yet enormous question. What if we are looking at evolution in real time and simply don't recognize it yet? And while scientists continue to debate theories and search for answers, Kodinhi moves at its own quiet rhythm, 2 steps at a time. Another Indian mystery that defies logic lies far to the north, where a road behaves like an optical illusion that bends gravity itself. High in the cold, windswept landscape of Ladakh, there is a stretch of road where the world behaves strangely. A place where the rules of physics seem to loosen their grip. Known simply as Magnetic Hill, this barren patch of tarmac has earned its reputation as one of India's most baffling natural illusions, or, as some claim, a place where gravity itself goes rogue. Picture a silent valley hemmed in by rugged, sand-colored mountains. The air is thin, the sky blindingly blue, and the only sound is the dull echo of wind slipping through the rocks. At first glance, Magnetic Hill looks like any other stretch of Himalayan road, an empty curve, a painted marker, a signboard that reads, "The phenomenon that defies gravity." And then you see it. A car parked at the base of what appears to be a downhill slope begins to roll uphill, slowly at first, then with increasing confidence, as if pulled by an invisible hand. No engine, no push, just forward motion against the natural flow of gravity. Travelers film it with disbelief. Cyclists try it and feel the pull in their bones. Even water poured onto the road appears to drift upward. For decades, Magnetic Hill has been called a mystery, a marvel, a trick, and sometimes something otherworldly. The first reports of Magnetic Hill's strange behavior came from soldiers posted in the region decades ago. They noticed that their vehicles moved unnaturally on that patch, not downhill, but uphill, even when engines were turned off. Curious officers tested heavy trucks, bikes, anything on wheels. The result was always the same. The vehicles drifted upwards, defying every physical expectation. Word spread. Tourists began stopping at the marked line on the road. Local drivers demonstrated the effect with practiced confidence. Every year, more and more people came to witness the strange pull. Some believe the hill contains powerful magnetic minerals that tug at metal. Others say the unusual terrain distorts the Earth's gravitational field. A few go further, suggesting the presence of unexplained energies, the sort that ancient travelers might have described as sacred, curse, or supernatural. But to scientists, the mystery begins with something simpler: the eye. According to researchers who studied the area, Magnetic Hill is not actually defying gravity at all. Instead, it creates a powerful optical illusion. The surrounding landscape, the angle of the mountains, the curvature of the valley, the horizon line, tricks the human brain into misjudging slope and distance. What looks like an incline is actually a decline. What seems like uphill is, in reality, downhill. This phenomenon is called a gravity hill illusion, and there are a few scattered around the world, in Canada, South Korea, and the United States. They all create the same puzzling effect. But Ladakh's version has something those others don't: intensity. When scientists performed slope measurements, the results indicated a very slight downward gradient, just enough to make a vehicle roll naturally, but not enough to be visually obvious. With the mountains tilted at awkward angles, the horizon obscured, and the valley subtly sloping, the brain misinterprets everything. But this explanation, while satisfying to some, leaves many questions unanswered. For decades, locals and travelers have insisted that Magnetic Hill feels different from ordinary optical illusions. Vehicles don't just roll, they accelerate. Heavier objects seem to move with surprising ease. Birds flying low appear to alter their path slightly, though this observation remains anecdotal. Some claim that aircraft flying overhead reported mild fluctuations in instruments when directly above the spot. While the Indian Air Force has not publicly confirmed this, the rumor continues to feed speculation. Another belief ties Magnetic Hill to Ladakh's ancient trade routes. Some elders say the area was once considered a road to heaven. Travelers who passed the test, those pulled magically upward, were believed blessed. Those who were not passed unnoticed, deemed unworthy. The story, though folkloric, adds a sense of ancient reverence to the location. To support the magnetic explanation, some point to the unique geology of the Himalayas, a region formed by massive tectonic collisions. Rocks here often contain iron and magnetite. It's conceivable, they argue, that an unusually high concentration of magnetic minerals could affect vehicles. But studies found the magnetic levels on the hill too low to cause such movement. And yet, locals insist there's something unusual about the place. Animals avoid lingering there. Certain compasses jitter or behave sluggishly. Some travelers report dizziness or a strange heaviness in the head, though that could be the altitude as well. Even scientists who support the optical illusion theory admit that Magnetic Hill is one of the strongest examples in the world. Something about the landscape intensifies the effect far beyond what the measured slope would suggest. What fascinates visitors most is how effortlessly the hill exposes the brain's vulnerability. Our sense of what is up and what is down depends entirely on visual cues. Remove the horizon, distort the angles, tilt the background, and the brain simply misfires. Magnetic Hill turns that vulnerability into a spectacle. It forces people to question instincts they rely on every day. Is the car really rolling up? Is the slope what it appears? Can we trust our senses? In a way, the hill becomes a metaphor, a reminder that what we believe is real might depend on the frame we're looking through. Ladakh itself already feels like another world. Harsh, beautiful, ancient, surrounded by mountains that look like sleeping giants. And in this surreal landscape, a road that makes vehicles climb by themselves doesn't seem entirely out of place. Travelers often describe an uncanny calmness there. Maybe it's the silence of the mountains. Maybe it's the thin air. Or maybe it's the hypnotic pull of a road where reality bends, even if only in appearance. Stand there long enough, and you start to understand why the mystery endures. Because even with scientific explanations, the experience refuses to feel ordinary. People expect illusions to look like tricks. Magnetic Hill, instead, feels real, and that's what makes it unsettling. Visitors drive away with the same lingering thought. If something this obvious can fool my senses, what else am I misreading? Another Indian mystery challenges logic in an entirely different way. A village that vanished overnight, leaving behind silence, abandonment, and a curse whispered through generations. In the vast, sun-baked expanse of Rajasthan's Thar Desert lies a village that looks frozen in its final breath. Stone houses without roofs, courtyards filled with sand, streets that lead nowhere. Not a single sign of life, yet everything feels as if the residents left only hours ago. This is Kuldhara, a village abandoned in one night, sealed under a curse that, to this day, no one has dared to challenge. The moment you step past the broken gate, an uneasy stillness settles around you. Even the wind seems to hesitate. There's no wildlife, no birdsong, no footsteps except your own. And as the sun dips behind the desert ridge, the shadows stretch long and thin, making the empty homes feel like open mouths waiting to speak. Kuldhara isn't just a ruin. It's a mystery wrapped in silence, a place where history and fear have fused so deeply that no one has lived here in over 2 centuries. Before it fell into legend, Kuldhara was once a wealthy Palaiwal Brahmin settlement. For generations, its people were known for advanced irrigation techniques and desert farming skills far ahead of their time. They grew crops where others saw only dust. They built homes with precise ventilation, that cooled the blistering desert heat. They led quiet, prosperous lives. But prosperity in remote lands often draws the wrong kind of attention. And in the early 1800s, that attention came in the form of Salim Singh, the powerful and feared Diwan of Jaisalmer, a man whose cruelty was whispered about across the kingdom. His obsession with Kuldhara would spark one of India's most chilling disappearances. According to surviving accounts and local lore, Salim Singh saw the village's wealth and wanted to exploit it. He imposed high taxes on the Palaiwals, squeezing them until they could barely survive. But wealth wasn't all he wanted. The Diwan reportedly became enamored with the village chief's young daughter. He demanded she be handed over to him, an order that the Palaiwals considered not only immoral but unthinkable. Defying the Diwan, however, was a death sentence. Facing an impossible choice, the village elders gathered for an emergency council. The night was heavy with tension. The decision they reached would shape Kuldhara's fate forever. Instead of surrendering the girl, the villagers chose something far more drastic. Sometime between sunset and dawn, the entire population of Kuldhara, more than 1,500 people, vanished. No bodies, no bags left behind, no fires burning in the hearths, no signs of struggle. Just an entire village wiped clean, as if its residents stepped out of their own lives and dissolved into the desert wind. Even more astonishing, not only Kuldhara emptied itself, but 84 neighboring Palaiwal villages also disappeared the same night. Thousands of people moved silently across the desert, with no one witnessing their departure. How is it possible for so many people to walk away without leaving a trace? No records, no sightings, no return. That is where the curse enters the story. Before abandoning their homes, the Palaiwals are said to have placed a curse on Kuldhara. Anyone who attempts to live here will meet an untimely death. This wasn't a symbolic warning. Over the years, several small groups tried to settle in the abandoned village, nomads, merchants, families seeking free land. Every attempt ended abruptly. People reported strange illnesses, accidents, or an overwhelming sense of dread that drove them away before completing a single night. The curse became self-fulfilling. Kuldhara was left exactly as it was. With time, the village earned a reputation as one of India's most haunted locations. Visitors claim to hear footsteps echoing on the sand, even when they are alone. Some report seeing shadows flit between the doorways. Others feel the temperature drop sharply inside roofless homes, as if someone is standing near them. Local guards, assigned by the government for safety, speak of hearing women whispering, children crying, and heavy breathing behind them. When they turn around, there's only empty air. One guard described a particular night when he saw a lantern swinging in a house with no roof and no wind. He refused to return to that spot again. Paranormal investigators who conducted nighttime surveys detected temperature, anomalies, and rapid spikes in electromagnetic readings. They recorded faint voices, one repeating the same line over and over, to leave. Each story fuels the village's eerie aura. Whether ghostly or psychological, one thing is certain. Kuldhara does not let people forget it easily. One of the strangest details reported by early explorers is that food was allegedly left mid-preparation in several homes. Water pots filled, cooked grains left uncovered, kitchen tools placed as if the cook had been interrupted. If the villagers had planned to leave, why abandon meals? If they left in panic, why is there no sign of chaos? Every doorway is strangely intact. No furniture is toppled. No valuables were looted later, perhaps out of fear of the curse. Everything looks paused. Scholars argue that such details might be exaggerations, added through oral storytelling over generations. But even without the dramatization, the fact remains. A mass exodus was unnaturally quiet, unnaturally coordinated, and unnaturally permanent. The desert routes around Kuldhara are harsh and unforgiving. The Palaiwals would have needed water, food, camels, carts, and careful planning to move such numbers. Yet no preparations were ever found. It's almost as if the plan had existed long before the Diwan's final demand. Some historians suggest the Palawals may have had secret escape routes, known only to their community. Others believe they sought refuge in remote parts of Rajasthan, blending into other villages under new identities. Yet no Palawal descendants have ever been conclusively linked to the people of Kuldhara. For a community famous for documentation and record-keeping, their sudden disappearance, with no trace of integration anywhere else, remains baffling. Archaeologists who examined Kuldhara found that the homes were built with advanced planning, streets aligned with wind patterns, water conservation systems laid out with precision, and thick walls made to endure desert storms. The Palawals were not impulsive people. They were meticulous. They were organized. They were skilled. For them to abandon everything so swiftly, something catastrophic must have triggered it. But was it truly the Diwan's threat? Or were there deeper problems? Drought, economic pressure, internal conflict? Even those alternative explanations fail to fit the biggest mystery. Why did the disappearance spread to 84 villages simultaneously? Mass migrations of that scale leave cultural footprints. This one didn't. Today, Kuldhara is preserved by the Archaeological Survey of India. Visitors can walk its empty streets, step into houses without roofs, and see the cracked temple where the villagers prayed for centuries. It feels like a place waiting for its people to return, but knowing they never will. On moonlit nights, the shadows stretch unnaturally long. The silence deepens. The air grows colder. And for a moment, you understand why no one has claim over this land anymore, why it remains suspended between history and legend. The curse, whether real or imagined, still holds the village in a tight grip. People come and go, but no one stays. Kuldhara endures as one of India's most unsettling unsolved mysteries. Another mystery from the deserts of India is stranger still, a story of bones, ice, and a Himalayan lake filled with hundreds of skeletons that appear and disappear with the changing seasons. High in the Himalayas, far above the tree line, where oxygen thins and silence swallows sound, lies a lake that should not exist. A small circle of water, frozen most of the year, hidden at nearly 16,000 feet. Trekkers call it Roopkund, but its more haunting name is Skeleton Lake, because when the ice melts, hundreds of human bones rise out of the water. Skulls, ribs, ankles, entire skeletons, scattered along the edges and shimmering beneath the crystal surface. It's as if the mountain preserved a mass death in perfect stillness, revealing its secret only during the brief summer thaw. Roopkund is not just an archaeological site. It is a riddle so strange that, nearly a century after its discovery, scientists are still debating who these people were, why they died together, and why no local tribe claims them as ancestors. The mystery begins in 1942, when a forest ranger on patrol stumbled upon bones poking through the melting ice. At first, he assumed they belonged to soldiers from a recent conflict. But as the thaw continued, the number grew. Dozens of skeletons. Then hundreds. Men, women, even children. Whatever happened here was not a skirmish. It was a catastrophe, one that left no survivors to tell the tale. As the British investigated the discovery, 4 theories emerged almost immediately. 1. The skeletons belonged to an ancient army marching through the Himalayas. 2. They were victims of a devastating. 4. They were sacrificed during a ritual, an idea reinforced by local legends of angry mountain gods. But every theory fell apart under scrutiny. None of the bones bore signs of weapons. There were no cooking tools, no family belongings, no shelters, nothing to suggest these people camped or lived here. And the injuries on the skulls were unlike anything archaeologists had seen. Most skulls had deep, round fractures, almost like blows from above, delivered with tremendous force. Not sideways, not from human hands, but directly downward, as if something fell from the sky. Local folklore offered a chilling explanation. Villagers in Uttarakhand spoke of a king who once defied the wrath of the goddess Nanda Devi. According to the tale, he insisted on taking musicians and dancers with him on a pilgrimage, an act considered disrespectful in sacred terrain. Angered, the goddess created a storm of ice, killing them instantly. For decades, this remained just a legend, until modern science began closing in. In the early 2000s, scientists collected skeletal samples to determine who these people were. The results stunned everyone. The skeletons did not belong to a single group. Some were of South Asian ancestry, consistent with local peoples. But a significant portion had Mediterranean genetic markers, closer to ancient Greeks or people from the eastern Mediterranean coast. Why would a Mediterranean group be in the Himalayas centuries ago? And why would they travel alongside South Asians? Even stranger, the groups died in different centuries. The South Asian skeletons date back to around the 9th century. The Mediterranean group, nearly 1,000 years later. 2 separate episodes of mass death at the same lake. No weapons. No signs of disease. No evidence of burial. Just people caught unprepared in the wrong place at the wrong time. When forensic teams examined the fractures again, they found all the injuries were caused by spherical blunt objects. Not blades, not clubs, not rocks thrown by attackers. The shape and distribution matched massive hailstones, large enough to crush skulls. The villagers' myth suddenly sounded less. Imagine being trapped in a high-altitude valley, surrounded by mountains that funnel wind and amplify storms. Hail the size of cricket balls falling from thousands of feet in sub-zero conditions could be instantly fatal. Many scientists now believe the first group died in a freak weather event, a storm so violent that no one survived long enough to seek cover. But this explanation raises a haunting question. What about the Mediterranean group that arrived centuries later? Their remains show similar injuries, similar fractures, similar cause of death. 2 groups, separated by centuries, struck down by the same unlikely catastrophe at the same spot. Coincidence? Climate pattern? Or something more complex? A place where nature's fury repeats itself with uncanny precision. Among the bones, investigators found items that deepened the mystery rather than solved it. Iron spearheads, wooden artifacts, jewelry made of glass and copper, fragments of leather shoes, beads that didn't match any known local tradition, pieces of textile woven in patterns unfamiliar to Himalayan tribes. These were not soldiers, not monks, not villagers on pilgrimage. Their belongings suggested travelers of diverse backgrounds, possibly merchants, explorers, or migrants following unknown trade routes. But if they were traveling with intent, why were they carrying almost no food? Why were there so few personal items? Why did they attempt such a dangerous climb with no preparation? It is as if they expected protection, spiritual, royal, or supernatural, yet nature overruled it every time. Unlike burial sites, where bones are carefully placed, Roopkund skeletons show no arrangement. Bodies tumbled and scattered over time, moved by avalanches, snowmelt, and wind. Yet the bones are unusually well preserved, protected by the lake's cold temperatures and the region's dry climate. Clothing fibers survived for centuries. Even hair was found on some skulls. During certain summers, the melting water reveals dozens of skeletons at once, a sight that feels too deliberate to be accidental. Even trekkers describe an eerie sensation. It feels like the dead are simply waiting for the snow to melt so they can surface again. There are lakes with fossils, lakes with animals preserved in ice. But nowhere else in the world is there a lake. After decades of study, one conclusion has emerged. There is no single explanation. The idea of hailstorms is supported by evidence, but it doesn't explain the presence of unrelated groups centuries apart. It doesn't explain why they gathered in such a dangerous valley. It doesn't explain why no descendants claim them. Even today, villagers believe the lake is cursed, a place where the wrath of the mountains falls without warning. Scientists believe the truth lies somewhere between nature and history. But trekkers who visit Roopkund say there is something else, silence thick enough to feel, as if the mountains remember what humans have forgotten. And when the sunlight hits the water just right, dozens of skulls stare back from beneath the icy surface, each holding a story that ended the same way, suddenly, violently, and forever unanswered. Another Indian mystery carries political weight, global intrigue, and decades of conflicting reports. The disappearance of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, a leader whose final hours remain one of the country's most disputed riddles. Few mysteries in India carry the weight, emotion, and political tension of one man's disappearance. Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose was not just a freedom fighter. He was a force, a symbol, a man who believed independence must be seized, not begged for. He defied the British, challenged Gandhi, raised an army across continents, and inspired millions. And then, suddenly, he vanished. On the afternoon of August 18, 1945, just days after World War II ended, the world received a single shocking announcement. Subhas Chandra Bose died in a plane crash in Japanese-occupied Taiwan. But from the moment the news broke, doubts erupted. There was no body, no death certificate, no official photograph, no closure for a nation that adored him. And from that moment on, India fell into a mystery so deep that decades of commissions, eyewitness accounts, classified documents, and political silence have still not solved it. The official narrative begins at Taihoku Airport. Bose, heavily disguised, boarded a Japanese military transport plane headed for Manchuria, where he planned to regroup after Japan's surrender. Eyewitnesses claimed the plane crashed shortly after takeoff. Bose, they said, was pulled from the burning wreckage with severe burns and died later that evening in a hospital. But even in 1945, inconsistencies started piling up. The crash was described as minor and survivable by several Japanese personnel. The flight logs were incomplete. In some versions, he walked out of the wreckage on his own. In others, the crash barely occurred. Most importantly, every document that could have settled the case mysteriously disappeared or contradicted another. Where was the body? This was the first red flag. According to doctors, Bose's body was cremated the next day, and the ashes sent to Tokyo's Rinkeji Temple, where they remain even today. But Indian investigators who visited the temple years later found no official Japanese paperwork confirming the identity of the ashes. The labels were vague. The testimony was inconsistent. The documentation was based entirely on memory. And every time the question came back, where is Netaji's body? The answer remained foggy, evasive, and strangely convenient. If the most influential revolutionary in colonial India died in a foreign land, why did not a single official, doctor, or soldier produce a signed, verifiable death record? By the 1950s, a new wave of testimonies emerged, contradicting the crash narrative entirely. Several Indian soldiers from the Indian National Army claimed Bose was never on that plane. Others insisted he had escaped in a second aircraft. Some swore he was taken into Soviet-controlled territory under Stalin's protection. One witness, an officer from the Japanese army, made a stunning claim. A plane crash was staged. Bose left before the fire. He wasn't alone. Multiple Japanese personnel independently repeated the same story. The crash was real, but Bose had already left the area, using a separate route, a strategic escape disguised as tragedy. If true, it meant India's most wanted rebel may have survived the war and gone underground. As the Cold War unfolded, rumors intensified. Bose's strong ties with Germany and Japan meant he risked execution if captured by the Allies. The Soviet Union, however, had a different agenda, and a long history of offering protection to anti-colonial leaders. A series of testimonies emerged from Indian diplomats, former Soviet officers, and political intermediaries, all suggesting one thing: Bose reached Russia. He was alive after 1945. He was held, hidden, or negotiating from behind the Iron Curtain. One diplomat claimed he saw a man resembling Bose in a Siberian prison camp. Another said Soviet officials privately hinted India did not know the truth about Bose. Even in Parliament, Prime Minister Nehru's correspondence contained subtle references to Bose being in the USSR, though the letters remained controversial and debated. The deeper investigators dug, the stranger it got. Files were missing. Key witnesses refused to speak, and some testimony seemed deliberately vague, as if entire governments were invested in preserving uncertainty. In the 1960s, a mysterious ascetic appeared in Uttar Pradesh. He lived quietly, avoided crowds, and never revealed his identity. People who met him described him as eloquent, multilingual, and surprisingly well-versed in international affairs. Locals called him Gumnami Baba or Bhagwanji. It would have remained a local curiosity until a few visitors noticed uncanny similarities: his voice, his handwriting, his knowledge of Aina operations, his deep connections with Bose's closest associates. Inside his room after his death, investigators found items impossible to ignore: letters from Aina veterans, glasses identical to Bose's prescription, books marked with references only Bose could understand, a radio tuned to foreign broadcasts every night, typewriters identical to models used in wartime Europe. Even a DNA test ordered decades later produced inconclusive, contradictory results, neither fully confirming nor fully denying Bose's connection. It was the kind of result that widened the mystery instead of settling it. India formed 3 major investigative commissions. The Shah Nawaz Committee concluded Bose died in the crash, though half the members dissented. The Khosla Commission repeated the same story, leaning heavily on Japanese testimony. The final one, the Mukherjee Commission, did something unprecedented. It rejected the plane crash entirely. It declared that Bose did not die in Taiwan, that the ashes in Japan were not his, that the evidence of the crash was unreliable, contradictory, or staged. Instead of closing the case, the report created more chaos. The government refused to accept it. Archives remained locked, and families continued demanding the truth. And the mystery endured. Why would a man of Bose's stature vanish deliberately? One theory suggests he planned to return when India truly needed him, a promise he allegedly made to Aina comrades in 1945. Another claims political tensions after independence made it safer for him to remain unseen. Some believe he lived in exile to avoid international complications during the Cold War. Others insist he died honorably, exactly as reported, and the rest is conspiracy. But one fact overshadows all theories: no universally accepted evidence, not one conclusive document, not one verified photograph, not one confirmed witness has ever ended the debate. Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose remains a man who could inspire millions in life, and millions more in disappearance. And India still does not know whether its boldest revolutionary died in a foreign hospital, or lived in the shadows for decades. Another Indian mystery lies not in politics, but in gold, a treasure stolen, hidden, or destroyed more than 1,000 years ago, tied to one of the most sacred temples in India. The lost treasure of Somnath Temple begins that trail of unanswered questions. Among all the mysteries scattered across India's history, few blend faith and fear as sharply as the legend of the lost treasure of Somnath. This wasn't just a temple. It was an empire of gold, a symbol of power, and a site so sacred that for over 1,000 years it stood as one of Shiva's most revered shrines. But behind its holiness lay something else entirely, a treasure so vast that invaders crossed deserts for it. Kings built armies around it, and storytellers still whisper about what happened to it after it vanished. The Somnath Temple, standing on the western coast of Gujarat, wasn't a single monument. It was rebuilt again and again, a cycle of devotion and destruction. And at the heart of every reconstruction lies the same unanswered question: where did its unimaginable riches go? Ancient texts describe Somnath as dazzling literally. Gold-plated walls, gemstone-studded pillars, silver doors, and statues crowned with diamonds. Pilgrims wrote of a temple that glowed at sunrise like a furnace of gold. The central linga, according to some accounts, was suspended mid-air through magnetic force, a detail that appears in several medieval descriptions and remains a point of debate among historians. What no one debates, however, is that Somnath's wealth was real. Too real. Temptingly real. In the year 1025 CE, Mahmud of Ghazni set his sights on Somnath. This was no ordinary expedition. It was a 1,600-kilometer march across the Thar Desert. His army fought thirst, heat, and rebellion, but the lure of the temple's treasure pushed them forward. When Ghazni reached Somnath, he found a fortress, not a shrine. Thick fortified walls, thousands of defenders, and a temple overflowing with gold. After a brutal battle, his soldiers broke inside and seized what chroniclers describe as an almost impossible quantity of treasure: gold plates, emerald necklaces, sapphire-encrusted idols, pearls, and coins, measured not in sacks, but in rooms. Then came a moment that would shape the legend forever. Ghazni ordered the sacred linga smashed open. To his shock, it was hollow and filled with jewels. This detail appears in multiple medieval sources, some exaggerated, some reserved, but together they sketch a picture clear enough. Somnath's wealth was so vast that even its gods were carved around treasure. But here's where the mystery begins. Ghazni carried away tons of gold and jewels, but not all of it. Chroniclers noted that Somnath's priests hid treasures prior to the invasion. Some tunnels were sealed, chambers were bricked up, and certain sanctums were never found by the raiders. What was hidden, and where, has never been uncovered. Somnath did not stay destroyed. It rose again and again and again. After Ghazni's raid, the Solanki kings rebuilt it. For a time, the temple returned to its former glory. Pilgrims filled its halls, and offerings of gold and silver flowed in once more. But Somnath's comeback came with danger. Rich temples attract attention, often the wrong kind. Over the centuries, the temple was attacked multiple times by Alauddin Khilji's commanders, by Zafar Khan, and by other forces seeking wealth rather than faith. Each cycle repeated itself: destruction, rebuilding, restoration, reverence. And in every retelling, we hear the same whispers. Gold disappeared before invaders arrived. Priests smuggled treasures into subterranean vaults. Secret chambers were sealed and never reopened. By the time the Mughal Empire reached its height, Somnath's treasures were already the stuff of myth. The question wasn't whether the treasure existed. Everyone knew it did. The question was where it had gone. Over the last century, explorers, archaeologists, and treasure hunters have offered dozens of theories about what happened to the lost riches. The most compelling ones fall into three groups. 1. The subterranean vault theory. Like many ancient temples, Somnath was built atop a network of tunnels. Some were for priests, some for escape routes, and some, according to local legends, for treasure storage. British researchers in the 19th century documented rumors of sealed underground chambers. Beneath the temple chambers, no excavation has ever confirmed. Some believe the passages collapsed long ago. Others argue they were deliberately destroyed to hide their contents. Even today, portions of the land beneath Somnath remain unexplored. 2. The sea route escape theory. Somnath sits beside the Arabian Sea. Old coastal records mention a series of concealed jetties that once connected the temple to small boats. When an invasion was imminent, Priests may have loaded the temple's wealth onto vessels that sailed west toward Oman, Yemen, or even East Africa. Some Gujarati communities living abroad today claim their ancestors carried ceremonial gold from Somnath when fleeing attacks, a thread of oral history that has never been fully investigated. If the treasure left by sea, then it may lie in foreign vaults or at the bottom of the ocean. 3. The royal transfer theory. Some historians believe the Solanki kings relocated portions of Somnath's wealth to inland strongholds. A few inscriptions mention the transport of offerings of great value to Anhilwarapatan during troubled times. The royal family, fearing further attacks, may have safeguarded the temple's riches across their empire. If true, the treasure could be hidden in old forts, buried chambers, or forgotten royal granaries. The modern Somnath Temple, reconstructed in the mid-20th century under the guidance of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, stands tall again, but without the golden splendor of its ancient past. Despite multiple surveys and ground-penetrating scans, no trace of the legendary treasures has surfaced. Either they were removed long ago, or they remain buried deeper than anyone has searched. Temples often keep detailed records, offerings, land grants, inventories, but Somnath's history is shattered. Wars destroyed archives. Inscriptions were defaced. Manuscripts referencing temple gold are incomplete. Much of what we know comes from foreign chroniclers, Arab historians, Persian writers, and later European travelers. They documented what they saw, but not what lay hidden. India's own written memory of Somnath's treasure is fractured, leaving room for speculation, folklore, and theories that grow stronger every year. Even today, locals speak of lights near the ruins at night, of sealed stone slabs beneath the earth, of metal rings embedded in old floors suggesting trapdoors. Stories persist of divers who explored the waters near Somnath and found carvings underwater, suggesting older, submerged parts of the complex that may hide clues. Nothing has ever been confirmed. Nothing has ever been disproven. Somnath's treasure is not just about gold. It's about knowledge, power, and a 1,000-year mystery protected by time, war, and silence. And whenever a discovery seems close, something always interrupts it. Political hurdles, structural concerns, environmental issues, or simply the temple's own sacred status. Perhaps the mystery endures because people want it to. Or perhaps the treasure was never meant to be found. From buried riches to vanished cities, another Indian riddle lies deep in the sands of Gujarat, where one of the Indus Valley's greatest urban centers rose, prospered, and then disappeared. The story of the vanishing city of Dholavira begins where Somnath's legends leave off. On the island-like plain of Kadirbet, surrounded by the white desert of the Great Rann of Kutch, lies the ancient city of Dholavira, a place that once rivaled the great centers of the Indus Valley civilization. Today it is silent, carved into ruins of stone and clay, but thousands of years ago, this city was a marvel of engineering, mathematics, and urban planning. And then, without warning, it emptied. No war, no fire, no mass graves, no final message carved into stone. A thriving city simply vanished. Dholavira wasn't like Mohenjo-daro or Harappa. Those sites were crowded with tight streets and densely packed homes. Dholavira was different. Wide avenues, enormous reservoirs, vast open spaces, monumental gateways, and architecture so symmetrical it looks computer-planned. Its builders didn't just understand water, they mastered it. And that's the first piece of the mystery. Dholavira stood in one of the driest regions of the subcontinent. Today, rain is scarce, and the ground is white with salt. Yet 4,500 years ago, this was a flourishing metropolis. How? Because the people of Dholavira designed one of the most advanced water management systems in the ancient world. They carved massive reservoirs deep into bedrock, some as large as football fields. Canals channeled seasonal streams into storage tanks. Stone weirs slowed the flow of water, preventing erosion. Engineers devised a wayside system to ensure that even in drought, the city would survive. This wasn't random ingenuity. It shows planning, scientific observation, and an understanding of geology that seems startlingly modern. But the city's brilliance deepens the mystery. If Dholavira had mastered water, why did it die of thirst? Archaeologists studying Dholavira often say the same thing. This city shouldn't have existed here. The layout is precise, a perfect rectangle divided into three main sections: the citadel, the middle town, and the lower town. Each area was fortified separately, almost like nested cities within a city. The gateways were monumental, built with cut sandstone blocks, so expertly placed that a knife blade cannot slide between them. And then there's the famous signboard, one of the oldest known signboards in the world. It once contained 10 massive Indus symbols, each carved on giant gypsum pieces. No other Indus site has anything like it. It suggests writing used for public display and a high level of civic organization. But the biggest question remains: why did this place, so orderly and advanced, fall into absolute silence? Dholavira flourished for nearly 1,200 years, an entire civilization inside one walled city. But around 2000 BCE, changes began. Layer by layer, the city's archaeological record tells a story of stress. Reservoirs contain more silt. Pottery becomes simpler. Houses shrink. Trade goods decline. These are the fingerprints of collapse. The leading theory is climate change. The monsoon weakened, rivers dried, and the sea slowly withdrew from the region. Dholavira depended on seasonal streams and rainwater runoff. As the region dried, its once mighty reservoirs emptied. But climate change alone doesn't explain everything. Other Indus cities survived. Dholavira did not. So what else happened? In its last years, something strange appears in the ruins. People abandoned the grand citadel and moved into the dried-out reservoirs. They built makeshift huts on the floors of the very tanks that once held water, a sign of desperation. But here's the odd part. They didn't destroy the old buildings. They didn't burn them. They didn't vandalize the monuments. It's as if the citizens believed they'd return someday, that the rains would come back, that their city would revive. But the rains never came. And then the people simply left. No records tell where they went. No burials mark their final days. No inscriptions explain why the city died. Just an empty stone grid facing a white desert. Dholavira wasn't isolated. It was a major trading port linked to Mesopotamia, Oman, Bahrain, and other regions. Shells from the Arabian Sea, beads from faraway lands, copper from Rajasthan, all found their way here. When the city declined, this trade suddenly evaporated. Why? Either the trade routes collapsed, or the traders themselves vanished. Some archaeologists believe the residents migrated east toward the Ganges plain, carrying their knowledge with them, possibly influencing the cultures that emerged later. But this is only theory. Still no inscriptions, no mass migration records, no genetic trail. Just one more civilization slipping out of history. Even nature seems determined to hide Dholavira. The Rann of Kutch floods seasonally, leaving thick layers of salt behind. Over centuries, these layers preserved the ruins, but erased organic material, the very things that might have revealed what happened. No wooden records, no fabric, no seeds, no bones in good condition. It's as if the earth wiped the slate clean. Yet the stone structures remain almost untouched, eerily intact, like an abandoned kingdom waiting for its people to return. The Indus Valley had no deciphered script, no readable chronicles. Everything we know is built from shards of pottery, broken beads, collapsed walls. Dholavira left no clear message, no prayers etched in stone, no warnings or laments. Only the skeleton of a city that seems too advanced for its time, too well engineered to fail, and too deliberately constructed to disappear quietly. Perhaps the people who lived here were the last guardians of a system already stretched thin by climate, trade instability, and social change. Or perhaps something else happened, something too subtle or sudden to leave visible traces. What remains is an enigma, a city that measured its world in geometry and stone, only to be swallowed by silence. Stand in the ruins today, and you see sharp-cut stone walls casting shadows exactly as they did 4,000 years ago. The reservoirs lie dry, but unmistakably purposeful. The citadel's gateways still command respect. There is no other Indus site quite like it, and none that vanished so completely. No battle, no conquest, no mass graves. Just a ghost city in a white desert, a civilization paused mid-step. But Dholavira is only one of India's unanswered riddles. If this city disappeared under the weight of nature, belief, or time, the next mystery turns not to stone, but to a living person, a man whose existence challenged science itself. Because the story of Prahlad Jani begins where Dholavira's silence ends. Deep in the forests of Gujarat, long before cameras and curiosity found him, lived a man who baffled doctors, challenged biology, and left behind one of India's strangest unsolved mysteries. His name was Prahlad Jani, though most knew him as Netaji, a devotee of the goddess Amba who claimed something that should have been impossible, that he had not eaten or drunk water in decades. Not a sip, not a bite, not even a drop. To many, he was a holy man. To others, an illusionist. But for the scientists who studied him, he became one of the most perplexing medical anomalies ever recorded. Prahlad Jani's story begins quietly. Born in 1929 in Sharada village, he left home as a young boy, feeling a spiritual pull toward ascetic life. At age 12, he experienced what he described as a divine vision, the goddess Amba appearing to him and granting him a form of sustenance beyond food and water. From that day forward, he claimed, he lived purely on the goddess's blessing. For decades, he wandered forests, meditated in caves, and lived as a hermit, mostly unnoticed by the world. That anonymity ended in the 1970s, when locals and pilgrims began reporting that Jani lived without consuming anything at all. No fields, no kitchen, no stored grain, no water pots. Yet he looked healthy, strong, active, even radiant. It sounded impossible, and perhaps because it sounded impossible, it drew attention. In 2003, a team of doctors in Ahmedabad decided to test these claims, not out of belief, but out of sheer curiosity. A man living without water, especially defied every biological rule. They placed Jani in a hospital room under round-the-clock surveillance for 10 days. Cameras watched him. Guards stood outside. His belongings were inspected. The bathroom was sealed. Every drop of liquid entering the room was monitored. And then something unexpected happened. 10 full days passed, and Jani consumed nothing. No food, no water, no swallowing, not even a rinsing of the mouth. Yet he showed no signs of dehydration, no weight loss beyond typical fluctuations, and no organ stress. His urine appeared to be producing normally, but then reabsorbed by the bladder wall, something unheard of in normal physiology. Doctors were confused. Skeptics were unconvinced. And the story grew. The Indian Defense Institute of Physiology and Allied Sciences, a branch of DRDO, took interest next. If someone could truly survive without water, even partially, understanding how might help soldiers in extreme environments. In 2010, the government arranged a 15-day continuous observation, even stricter than the first. Cameras never left him. Doctors ran blood tests, scans, and metabolic studies. Every bodily process was evaluated. And again, the same pattern emerged. No food entered his body. No water crossed his lips. No urine or stool was excreted. And still, he remained stable. Blood pressure normal, heart rate steady, lungs clear, kidneys apparently functioning. Scientists expected decline, collapse, organ shutdown. Instead, they saw calmness and a man who appeared as if nothing unusual was happening. One doctor described it simply, things we would expect to see in starvation or dehydration were not present. But the tests also raised more questions than answers. Human beings can typically survive to 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, and far less without losing cognitive function. Yet Jani walked around his room, meditated, spoke with clarity, and showed no biochemical crisis. His body seemed to conserve energy at a level bordering on the impossible. Theories emerged: extreme meditation control over physiology, slowed metabolism beyond known limits, recycling of fluids in ways science cannot yet measure, measurement errors, the skeptic's favorite explanation, a state of biological suspension resembling hibernation, or simply a hoax too perfect to detect. But none of these theories answered every question. If it was deception, how did he do it under 24-hour surveillance with multiple guards and assembled medical teams? If it was biology, why do no known humans share this ability? If it was spiritual, how do you test the divine? For Jani himself, the explanation was never scientific. He always said the goddess sustained him. He never claimed powers, never asked for fame, never charged money. He spoke softly, avoided crowds, and returned to the forests whenever attention became overwhelming. Visitors described him as serene, not mystical or dramatic, just unusually peaceful. Many ascetics in India live on minimal food, but even the most extreme cases still consume something: water, milk, herbal mixtures. Jani's claimed total abstention placed him in a category of 1, which is partly why his case disturbed so many researchers. It didn't fit into existing frameworks. Either something extraordinary was happening, or the human ability to deceive or be deceived was far stronger than assumed. Not everyone believed the research. Many argued the tests were flawed or that microsips of water were smuggled in. Others insisted cameras alone cannot guarantee perfect observation. But even skeptics admitted one uncomfortable truth: no one has successfully reproduced or disproven the conditions under which he was tested. His metabolism was low, but not impossibly low. His brain activity was steady. His organs showed no signs of starvation. Even when critics argued that the study design wasn't airtight, they couldn't fully explain. Why didn't he show dehydration markers? Blood tests should have changed drastically, but didn't. Why did he appear physically normal after 2 weeks? Weight loss should have been severe, but wasn't. Why didn't he collapse? The absence of water should have caused fatal organ failure, but it didn't. Whether miracle, phenomenon, or misunderstanding, something was undeniably happening inside Prahlad Jani's body, something no existing scientific model could neatly explain. After the 2010 study, curiosity around Jani intensified. Journalists visited him. Researchers reached out. Foreign press wrote articles. But Jani himself remained unchanged by the attention. He continued his ascetic life in a cave near Ambaji, greeting visitors but never seeking them. He meditated for hours daily, walked several kilometers effortlessly, lived alone without assistance. And he consistently repeated the same claim: he needed neither food nor water. He never tried to convert anyone. He never insisted others believe him. He simply said this was his path, his reality. Jani lived until 2020, passing away at the age of 90. His body looked strong until his final days, shocking even those who doubted his claims. An autopsy was not performed, leaving a permanent gap in understanding. Prahlad Jani sits at the intersection of India's spiritual heritage and modern physiological science. Ascetics have long claimed extraordinary control over the body, slowing heartbeats, generating heat, surviving harsh climates. But Jani's case stretches these boundaries to their breaking point. Perhaps he discovered a state of extreme metabolic conservation. Perhaps the studies missed something crucial. Or perhaps some mysteries exist in a realm neither science nor skepticism can fully map yet. India is filled with unexplained stories. Cities that vanished, riddles carved in stone, pilgrims lost to time, and places where nature behaves like an illusion. But few mysteries rest inside a single living person. What Prahlad Jani represents is not just a biological puzzle, but a reminder of how much remains unknown about the human body, the mind, and the line that separates belief from reality. And as we step from the enigma of a man who defied survival itself, the story naturally widens, because every mystery you've heard tonight, from vanishing cities to baffling phenomena, leads to a larger question. How much of India's past remains hidden, not lost, but simply waiting? In the end, every mystery we explored, from cursed villages and ghostly hills to vanished cities and impossible lives, reminds us how little we truly know about this ancient land. India is layered like a palimpsest. One story written over another, clues buried just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to return. Some secrets may never be solved, not because they're lost, but because they were never meant to yield easily. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey, like the video, subscribe, and tell us where you're listening from. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.